In 1614, a printed manifesto claimed that an invisible brotherhood could recognize its members across Europe. More than a millennium earlier, Greek writers described sacred knowledge that could not be spoken. In Egypt, access to ritual formulas was attached to priestly office. The striking fact is not that these groups used identical symbols. It is that their records repeatedly described the same administrative solution: admission, witness, silence, and penalty. I am Dr. Elias Thorn, and this is Stargate Codex. Today we examine the oath, not as a decorative promise, but as a legal architecture for controlling knowledge. In each episode, we bypass standard chronological textbooks to dissect preserved records, structural anomalies, and the guarded networks that shaped the transmission of knowledge. Here, the question is simple but difficult to answer. When a person swears silence, what exactly has been created? A private promise? A social bond? Or an institution with the power to decide who may know, speak, witness, and act? The archive cannot answer every mystery. It can, however, show how secrecy was organized. The evidence must be separated into layers. First, the words that survive. Second, the setting in which they were spoken. Third, the consequence attached to a breach. And fourth, the interpretation added by later writers. This matters because sources about secret groups are rarely neutral. An accusation may preserve the outline of a ceremony while distorting its meaning. A later constitution may formalize an older custom while changing its purpose. A legend may influence institutions even when its central event cannot be verified. The oath is therefore language, procedure, and record. It is never evidence by itself of an unbroken hidden order. In ancient Egypt, priestly knowledge was inseparable from rank and office. Temple inscriptions and administrative texts distinguish ritual specialists from the wider population. Literary sources also describe sacred names, liturgies, calendars, and technical procedures as matters not intended for ordinary disclosure. We do not possess one universal Egyptian secrecy oath. To claim that would overstate the record. What we do possess is a hierarchy of access. The priest did not merely know a formula. He possessed the recognized authority to perform it. Knowledge was attached to a jurisdiction, and jurisdiction determined who could speak with force. Greek terminology makes the boundary more visible. The word arrēton referred to what must not be spoken or disclosed. It identifies a prohibition, but not necessarily a standardized vow. Accounts of the Eleusinian mysteries provide stronger evidence that disclosure was socially and legally restricted, while offering no complete transcript of the central rites. Ancient testimonia are indirect and shaped by literary purpose. They establish that a boundary existed. They do not tell us everything behind it. That distinction matters. The archive supports controlled revelation more securely than it supports any reconstruction of a universal astronomical or prehistoric curriculum. The Roman sacramentum adds an explicitly juridical dimension. It could designate a military oath, a sworn bond, or a formal act of allegiance. Its importance lies in what happened after the words were spoken. The promise placed conduct under an authority capable of recording, judging, and punishing breach. Medieval institutions inherited a world saturated with sworn obligations: feudal bonds, monastic professions, guild rules, and military commitments. The oath joined speech to office, community, and consequence. Silence could be read as loyalty. Disclosure could be classified as betrayal. That legal structure becomes visible in the Templar proceedings begun in 1307 and continued through the early 14th century. Interrogation transcripts, papal procedures, royal investigations, and later summaries preserve allegations about initiation, obedience, symbols, and concealed practices. But these were not calm interviews conducted for historical preservation. They were produced amid interrogation, political pressure, and competing claims of jurisdiction. Some brothers recanted, others described initiation formulas differently. Many records reveal more about the conditions of questioning than about an undisturbed ceremony. The documents are still valuable. They show how confession was administered and how institutional loyalty was tested. They do not provide a transparent window into a single, unchanged Templar secret.
In this setting, the oath does something more complex than conceal information. It defines who has authority to define truth. An interrogator asks for a confession. A member invokes a prior obligation. A court records the exchange. The same words, obedience, witness, denial, admission, can function differently depending on which institution controls the proceeding. The oath is therefore not only a bond between an individual and a group, it is a contested instrument of jurisdiction.
In 1614, secrecy left the locked room and entered print. The Fama Fraternitatis presented the Rosicrucian Brotherhood through hidden wisdom, selective recognition, and communication across borders. It was a manifesto, not a verified membership register. Its power came partly from that ambiguity. The text could describe an invisible fraternity while inviting readers to search for its institutional reality. A printed document could now define who was prepared to understand, who might correspond, and who remained outside the circle. Secrecy had become portable.
18th century Masonic constitutions made that portability more administrative. Documents associated with the developing Grand Lodge system described lodge governance, offices, meetings, rules of recognition, and member obligations. Wording and ritual practice varied by jurisdiction and period, so no single formula should be projected backward across every lodge. Yet the organizational pattern is clear. A candidate passed through stages. Members recognized one another through authorized signs or words. Knowledge was graded rather than released at once. The lodge could preserve continuity across cities because recognition had been made procedural. Secrecy was no longer only concealment from outsiders, it was identification among insiders.
The Carbonari demonstrate how this logic could operate inside clandestine political cells without proving a direct line from ancient mysteries. In early 19th century Italy, sources describe local units, passwords, graded access, mutual recognition, and oath-bound discipline. Compartmentalization limited what one member needed to know about another. That protected communication, but it also created rank. The person who controlled admission controlled information. The person who controlled information controlled coordination. Later conspiracy narratives inflate these structures into a single omnipotent network. The surviving evidence supports something more concrete. Small groups used vows, signs, and restricted compartments to manage risk and loyalty.
Across these cases, 4 mechanisms recur. Speech is restricted, marking a boundary around specialized knowledge. Members are given methods of recognition that do not require public disclosure. Authority passes through authorized successors rather than open publication. And disclosure is graduated, so advancement becomes access. These similarities do not prove transmission. A temple, a military order, a fraternal lodge, and a clandestine cell can arrive at comparable procedures because they face comparable problems: entry, trust, memory, betrayal, and succession. Direct continuity requires evidence of contact, borrowing, or textual dependence. Where that evidence is absent, the responsible conclusion is institutional convergence, or retrospective pattern-making. So, what is the durable power of the oath? Not necessarily the content of the secret. The stronger mechanism lies in the rules governing its release. Who may receive it? Who may witness the transfer? Which office can impose a penalty? Which record confirms that the promise was made? Once those questions are answered, secrecy becomes measurable. It appears in ranks, initiation procedures, registers, depositions, constitutions, passwords, and authorized signs. The system does not require supernatural content. It can operate around a prayer,
a military command, a technical formula, or a political instruction. The oath converts information into jurisdiction and identity into institutional consequence.
The bounded conclusion is therefore clear. Egyptian priestly restrictions, Greek sacred prohibitions, medieval sworn obligations, Templar interrogation records, the Rosicrucian Fama, Masonic regulations, and Carbonari practices demonstrate a recurring historical technology. Vows regulate access, witnesses validate membership, penalties protect boundaries, authorized succession preserves the institution. These records do not prove one secret order stretching without interruption across every age. They demonstrate something more defensible. Whenever knowledge becomes scarce, valuable, or politically sensitive, an organization can transform silence into procedure. The oath does not merely hide information, it determines who has the right to release it.
Compare the cited oath formulas, testimonies, constitutions, and institutional records for yourself. Ask what each source establishes, what it leaves uncertain, and who possessed the authority to impose the penalty. Ask not only what was hidden, but who was permitted to reveal it. That concludes our historical tracking of this specific anomaly within the Codex. The records demonstrate that behind the curtain of standard history lies a repeating, systemic mechanism of knowledge transmission and governance preserved across generations. We have laid out the timeline, parsed the primary source texts, and exposed the architectural blueprint. The archive remains open for those who know how to read it. The archive never lies. The text remains.